Well, I got to look at this myself. Wow. What a view.
In a world of deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. It's the David Knight Show.
As the clock strikes 13, it's Wednesday, the 10th of June, year of our Lord 2026. Well, we're going to pick up today with where we left off yesterday, and that is the disclosure deception. We have Hollywood and government trying to gaslight us again, and this time they're going after God, and so we're going to talk about that. That's important. We're also going to talk about the true significance of Trump's $250 bill to honor himself, and how he is replacing the commemoration of America's Declaration of Independence with self-worship. And then, of course, there's the Iran quagmire that is droning on with an Apache helicopter shot down. Netanyahu's midterm is going to, his tactics are going to backfire. Does only Israel have the right to exist? Is that something that only Israel has? If that is going to be the case, and he's going to strong-arm everybody, it's going to backfire, already is backfiring severely. Now we're going to take a look at what's going on in Albania. Jared and Ivanka's island controversy is just the tip of a massive iceberg of the global crime syndicate known as the Trump family. We'll be right back. Yeah, let's start with Steven Spielberg. And as I played for you yesterday, he thinks that his movie is going to rattle your faith in God. And Hollywood is very excited about this. And quite frankly, I think the government is as well.
This truth were just known overnight. If the government announced, yes, we have been keeping this from you since 1947.
Now we're telling you the truth.
Mess up a lot of people. And the movie also takes the position of the church. What does this do to the fundamental beliefs that many of us have? And, is God our God only on this planet? Or is God a God for every system where there's civilization, intelligent life, and even developing life?
Even developing life. You see, he starts with an evolutionary perspective that rules out God as creator. And I've seen several commentaries about this, many of them on Christian sites, and of course, some of them will go in and make excuses for him. Oh, he didn't say it was going to attack Christianity. Well, what do you think the church is? It's not his synagogue that he's talking about. Of course, you've probably seen, I didn't put it in here, but you've probably seen the video of his mother going to this guy, the false Messiah, Rabbi, whatever his name is, Mearsheimer? I don't know what it is. I can't really remember. But the guy who was the leader of the Chabad,
Schneerson?
Schneerson, I think that's what it is, yeah. He's the guy that runs the Chabad Lubavitch group, right? And his site was the one where Ben Shapiro and Trump put on their caps and throw their request. They write something on paper and throw it into the grave of this false Messiah. And of course, that false Messiah was somebody that Steven Spielberg's mother famously went to and said, I want a blessing for myself. He's a filmmaker, you know. Very important, because we're here going to manipulate people's opinions. And this is just the latest example of it. Again, when he says that is our God, who is your God? Is our God only for this planet? See, right there, he rules out the Genesis creation. Yeah, Judaism today is not based on the Old Testament, folks. Not even from the very first verse, they have issue with it. Or is God a God for every system where there is civilization, intelligent life, and even developing life? So all of these different systems supposedly operate independently of God. They're all just evolving independent of him. He did not create the heavens and the earth. And it kind of throws it in there as an afterthought. Oh, and he created the stars also. Because that is not the big issue here. This is a false theology, if ever there was one. It explores the ontological shock and the social dislocation, he says, of discovering that institutions have been keeping secrets from us. Who knew, right? I mean, you think that the federal government is keeping secrets from us? With their national security state, everything is a secret. Everything is a lie. And so that would include this stuff as well. These are the people who have been on the inside of this for the longest time. And now they're going to tell us the truth. You want to believe that? She questions her fundamental beliefs about the government and the church, the main character played by Emily Blunt. Yeah, again, he's the one who is questioning the church. And this article here from a site called Church Leaders says, after Spielberg referenced faith, some people took to social media to accuse him of destroying Christianity. What do you think a church is about? Let's say Christianity is the only one that uses the term church. That's who he's talking about. One post that went viral noted that the director said Disclosure Day will have Christians and people of faith second-guessing their own religion. But Spielberg, who is Jewish, never referenced Christianity in his CBS interview. Well, he did question God, and he did reject the Genesis account, and he did talk about churches. So I don't know who's getting this wrong. Bottom line
I don't
is
think Emily Blunt's character is going to question her rabbi about
that's right.
her faith after the aliens invade.
Yeah, her Chabad Lubavitch rabbi. We can trust him. Well, the bottom line is that this is a movie I'm not going to be going to see, not just because of this, but in general, I don't like Steven Spielberg's films, especially if it doesn't have a soundtrack by John Williams. And from what I've seen, this does not have a soundtrack by John Williams. If you go back and look at what, for the longest time, was the highest grossing film from anybody, Spielberg included, and that was E.T. Came out in 1982. And it was the highest grossing film until it was replaced by Jurassic Park about a decade later. And I just, so that you understand, it's really about the music, especially for me. I absolutely was not impressed with E.T. when I saw it. At that point in time, I was 27, I think, and we're just rolling our eyes at this thing, the flying bicycles and all the rest of the stuff. But here's the scene without music and then with music.
Yeah! Oh! Ah! Oh my God!
Absolutely stupid. It became the symbol for his entertainment company, Amblin. You know, riding a bicycle across the silhouette of the moon that you're going to see here in a minute. Or actually the setting sun, I guess. Yeah, that became his symbol right there. Now listen to this when the music kicks in. Spielberg rides the coattails of John Williams. There's absolutely no doubt about it. Okay, here it comes with the music. Same scene. Yeah, you know, Spielberg himself used that as an example of how John Williams had contributed to his films, and a tribute to John Williams. And I looked at most of the Spielberg films. I got to say, I did enjoy Jurassic Park. I thought that was good filmmaking. But most of them, I just go to a dark theater in a hot area that I live in, sit there in air conditioning and listen to the concert of John Williams music. But anyway, the Close Encounters of the Third Kind, E.T., the Extraterrestrial, these are not films that I ever really enjoyed. I didn't watch them more than once. Actually, we did watch E.T. a second time with the boys, and Travis just absolutely hates it. And again, Jurassic Park is one of his favorite films, but he absolutely hates E.T. His fascination with the great unknown, he said, began as a child. The actual idea that we've been under observation and are being interacted with is something that I have kind of always hung on to as a core truth. Think about that. His core truth is not, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. That's not his core truth. His core truth is that there's aliens out there. And so what motivated him to write Disclosure Day, he said, was the inequity of information about off-planet civilizations being actually known by some, but not known by all of us. Yet he did know it as a core truth, right? How did he determine that core truth? Well, he says his new movie takes the position of the believers or the curious, the ones that have been certainly deeply affected by this. He says, if this truth were known overnight, if the government announced, yes, we have been keeping this from you since 1947, that would mess up a lot of people. And the movie also takes the position of the church. Again, he's not referencing Christianity, of course, right? And he's not selling you a fictional story. He's selling you the truth that he believes, the truth he's always believed, the core truth of his life. House Oversight Committee's hearings about UFOs, now called UAPs. Why did they have to rebrand it? And just ask yourself that question. What does that tell us? He said, his core truths, here's where he gets his core truths. He said, based on circumstantial evidence of everything I've gathered throughout my whole life, everything that I've listened to, every documentary that I have watched, and these testimonies in Congress, that is the basis for how Spielberg has determined what is true about UFOs. It's absolutely ridiculous.
The most ridiculous source is believing Congress.
Yeah, that's right. Believing Congress and CIA whistleblowers, people who are operating in these secret programs. That's right. So he gets his information from documentaries from some people that he's listened to. He says he hasn't had any experiences, and he doesn't say that he knows anybody directly who's had any experiences. He doesn't consider the Bible to be a reliable source of information, not like testimonies in Congress. The director refuted the idea that extraterrestrial life forms are aggressive, however. So how does he know that? Is it because he's been watching his own movies? They're never aggressive in his movies. He says if they're going to come to all this way to the earth, I don't believe they would come here to essentially colonize us or to do us harm. Well, why? Why does he think that? What is the feasibility of interstellar travel? I talked about that last week, and there isn't any feasibility for that as well. So he says it's going to raise theological questions, but he has no answers. And he has presuppositions that he has taken from questionable sources. And he rejects the standard of truth, the Bible. Again, ontological shock and social dislocation. In other words, why does he say ontological? Has he been talking to Carl Sagan? Well, no, actually, when you look at it, people will break down the way you analyze information. Ontological, you're looking at, in a more subjective way, I think. You're looking at being and reality versus, they typically contrast it with what they call epistemology, which is where you're studying what we have as knowledge and how that knowledge was gathered and determined. In other words, it's a little bit more analytical, more objective, but he chooses not to talk about epistemology, but ontology. It's really what is it reality, or is it just a social construct, is what he's talking about. And that's what he wants to do. He wants to say that your belief in God is not reality. It's just a social construct. That's why he refers to this as ontological shock. This guy is a propagandist. Understand where he is. A clip of Spielberg's comments went viral on X, saying it would shake the faith of Christians. Many users pushed back on that, yet he is setting himself up as opposition to God. I'm creating an ontological shock, and I think it's going to dislodge people from their beliefs in God. He said, one person said, the only people who think the existence of aliens would mess with Christianity are non-Christians who don't understand the first thing about Christianity. They don't understand what we consider to be the standard of truth. They don't understand epistemology either. This is the editor-in-chief of Crisis Magazine who said that. So there's been a heightened debate amongst Christians, some claiming the phenomenon are inextricable with the occult and the demonic. Again, from the people I've talked to, that is the majority opinion. And I agree with that. I think it is, first of all, deception. I think all deception is fundamentally demonic. Last week, you had a cardinal, McElroy, who removed a Monsignor in the Catholic Church from the Diocese of Syracuse. Now, this cardinal, it turns out, has been a big promoter of LGBT. The guy he removed was an exorcist. I guess, when you've got, I guess LGBT doesn't like exorcists because they frequently refer to themselves in the plural. And I've always talked about that. I said, yeah, how many of you are in there? Are you legion? What is really happening in there? So them and they pronouns. So some occultists, however, have historically linked UFO phenomena to sorcery. It's not just Christians who are saying this. You got a magician, Kenneth Grant, a British ceremonial magician, who studied under Aleister Crowley. He attributed the wave of UFO sightings beginning in 1947 to occult rituals that were conducted the year before by NASA rocket engineer Jack Parsons and Scientology founder L. Ron Hubbard. Who knows? Maybe Steven Spielberg can come up with his own science fiction religion.
It's a more well-known science fiction writer than Hubbard, certainly.
That's right, yeah. Last month, a group of charismatic pastors raised eyebrows, and they said they'd had a meeting about UFOs with U.S. officials who reportedly warned them to prepare the churches for this kind of shock that Steven Spielberg is trying to push through. Just understand that government itself is occultic. The national security state is occultic. Literally. That means hidden. When they do things in secret, when they do things in the dark, as far as I'm concerned, I personally regard the CIA and all these different agencies in the same way I would a secret society. And of course, John F. Kennedy was talking about these secret societies just before he was assassinated. It doesn't have to be something that is necessarily centered around the occultic, but look at the long history of the CIA and Russia and their Russian intelligence agencies and so forth. Look at how they got into remote viewing, into drugs, pushing drugs on other people, thinking that it was opening up all kinds of hidden knowledge to them. Folks, that is the very definition of occultic. They don't have to go around in robes and all the rest of this stuff to be an occult organization. They simply have to believe they've got hidden knowledge and that they can do these supernatural things, and they do believe that, as I pointed out last week. So U.S. officials reportedly warned them to prepare their churches. Again, there's no question that the American government is occultic, because the highest level of the American government is this very secretive, dark organization that's got a black budget that you're not allowed to see and all the rest of this. And when you look at what they do, how demonic and satanic do you have to be to overthrow governments, assassinate people, and create wars? To me, that is demonic and satanic, their goals and their actions. What they do and the money that they spend is all secretive. It's all hidden. It's all occultic. And they embrace the things that everybody recognizes as being occultic. So as all this is happening, we have this guy that is, News Nation continues to refer to this guy as a whistleblower, Dave Grush. He's a CIA guy. Yeah, you can have a CIA whistleblower. I mean, I've talked to John Kiriakou many times. If you're a real CIA whistleblower, folks, they'll kill you or put you in jail. This guy is not having any of those things happen to him. For decades, the American people have been treated like children, told that there are government secrets that they don't get to know, said Representative Eric Burlison, Republican from Missouri. This is the same guy that called the pastors together that created that stir about all that stuff. But yes, we've been treated like children, and we're not allowed to know virtually, whenever they want to hide something from us, they just say it's national security. It's not just about the UFO stuff. If you're concerned about that, Representative Burlison, why don't you start releasing information about some of this other stuff? Virtually everything that is hidden with national security is not about a nuclear weapon that we don't want people to have or anything like that. It's typically stuff that's going to protect their jobs, or it's going to protect some crime that they are engaged in. He described what he called a Tom Clancy-style dead drop of information coming into his office, saying, nobody should be afraid to provide information to Congress. Well, let me just say this. Congress should not be afraid to provide information to the American people. If you've got something you think we should know, read it on the floor. You can do that about the Epstein perps. You can do it about these documents, but they don't do it, do they? None of them do. I mean, we got people who are saying they're going to release this information. Thomas Massie has said it. You've got others who have said it, Nancy Mace. Just do it. Do it or shut up. I'm tired of that. Is it going to be genuine, or is it going to be manufactured intrigue that they're doing out here? Lawmakers also stress this is not just about potential evidence of extraterrestrials, but a question of whether Pentagon is spending money and whether it is avoiding congressional oversight. Bingo. Bingo. That's it. Follow the money. It's usually about the money. Former intelligence officer Grush told News Nation he's claiming the government has recovered vehicles of non-human origin. Is this a problem for Christians? Well, no, actually, it isn't. The people, again, as one person said, these are non-Christians. I would say they are non-readers of the Bible. They don't know the first thing about it. When you look at situations in the Bible, you have over and over throughout the Old Testament, through the New Testament, when Jesus is resurrected, when they have spiritual bodies, you can see them, but then at the same time, they can do things that typically we think of as being something that would be immaterial, a ghost or a projection or something like that. So they can sit there and you can touch them, that you can watch them eat, they can interact with people, and then they can just disappear, walk through a wall or something. That is what we see described in the Bible. And when they talk about the fact, there's got to be all kinds of extraterrestrials, well, of course there are. God himself is not of this earth, and neither are most of the creatures described in the Bible. Why would that cause anybody to question the Bible? As a matter of fact, when we talk about angels, we're really talking about a job description. We're not so much talking about a specific being. I mean, there are other angels like seraphim, cherubim, and things like that. And if you look at the AI depictions of these on YouTube, it is pretty amazing, trying to go from the description that Ezekiel gave. Nevertheless, there are others that don't look like wheels within wheels, covered in eyes, with wings, and all this other kind of stuff. There are some that look like humans and are indistinguishable. In the New Testament, we're told many people have entertained angels unaware that they are entertaining angels. So they are indistinguishable from human beings at some times. So they can look like whatever they want to look like. This is not something that is going to shake the faith of anybody who's ever read the Bible. Grush's allegations helped to spark congressional hearings, renewed public interest in UAPs, the rebranding of UFOs. found no verifiable evidence, however, that the U.S. government possesses extraterrestrial technology or that operates hidden programs to reverse engineer such technology. Yet, they're not willing to believe that. And this is just like the Republicans questioning the elections. It doesn't matter what evidence they get. They're not going to believe any of it unless it confirms their presuppositions. That's the same thing we're seeing with the people with the UFOs that are out there. As a matter of fact, Tim Burchett here in Tennessee has been one of the big pushers of all this. He said, if lawmakers toured Area 51, all they'd get is a T-shirt because the government would move everything else. Well, yeah. And guess what? If you went to Fort Knox, that's all you'd get as well, is a T-shirt. They move that gold. They hide everything from us. You're not going to audit the Fed either, are you? This is, again, it is a distraction. Go audit the Pentagon. They've never passed an audit. And the people who tried to audit them got a missile through their window for their trouble. Audit the White House. Everything the government does is a secret. This is no different from anything else. As a matter of fact, there was a great article on LifeSite News, and they were attacking some podcasters as well as a lot of what they call, I think, Big Catholic Incorporated. LifeSite is a Catholic site. They do not shy away from questioning things that are not consistent with their beliefs, however. And so there is EWTN, which I think is Eternal World Something Network. It's a Catholic cable thing, as well as a program called Catholic Answers. Both of them, they said, have fallen for the alien deception, along with Matt Walsh from Ben Shapiro's Daily Liars. I guess somebody should ask, Matt Walsh is the guy who did the documentary about what is a woman. Somebody should ask him, where's his source for all this? What is an alien? Well, it's reminiscent of the COVID media blitz, says LifeSite News, and I absolutely agree with that. Whenever you see some kind of a media blitz like this, your spidey sensors ought to start tingling. It ought to be a warning for you. Matt Walsh says, I've been a UFO believer for so long. Again, these are people who want to believe in this, and they're going to try anything they can find to shore up that belief. Conservatives, he said, tend to be more religious. They think they can't believe in aliens because it would call their faith into question. Well, no, again, as I said before, God is an extraterrestrial. You have seraphim, cherubim, angels, demons, on. And I'm sure there are many more that aren't even mentioned because they don't necessarily interact directly with us. Catholic authors who promote extraterrestrials, they said, have been on the podcast circuit. One guy they pointed out was the late Paul Thigpen in his attempt to normalize alien belief for Catholics. They have podcasters like Lila Rose, who has been really strong in terms of opposing abortion, but she's falling for this. She has platformed extraterrestrial promoters with no opposing interviews. They said traditionally minded individual Brian Holdsworth correctly warned us not to become distracted with UFOs while simultaneously floating the faulty rationale that there could be other biological life forms in this big universe. Again, this is Richard Dawkins style atheism being mixed in with a lot of different denominations. It's not just the Catholic Church. I mean, you're seeing this happening in a lot of Protestant organizations, and they point that out. They even say in Mormon churches as well. I don't know about that. I haven't seen that in the Protestant churches that I'm involved with. I haven't seen that type of push, but we see that happening. I mean, whether you're talking about Catholics or Mormons or just Christians, you're seeing all these different churches embrace all these aberrant ideas, celebrating LGBT, making it a worship service, if you will. They're going to do that with the aliens as well, whatever they think they are. I mean, these are people who imagine that there's, 50 different genders or whatever. They're not going to have any problem imagining that they're alien life forms either. LGBT-friendly Cardinal Robert McElroy, again, was the one who kicked out the guy who was who said that he thought they were demonic. He kicked him out of his position in the Catholic Church. So like COVID and like LGBT politics, dissent is not permitted. Catholic Incorporated, which is what LifeSite News calls it, doesn't seem to understand that belief in extraterrestrials turns Catholic dogma into rubble. And that's exactly what Spielberg would like to do. So again, he says, during the Arian heresy, half of the priests and the bishops went bad. One Cardinal Newman, said that it was the faithful lay people who held the church together during that crisis. And LifeSite News says that hour appears to have arrived again. We cannot blindly follow these people who are self-appointed leaders of these institutions, whether it's a individual church or whether it's a group of churches, a denomination, whether it's a Catholic church. And when you talk about the Arian heresy, that was a heresy that denied the divinity of Christ, said he was a created being. And it is interesting because that's what these people are basically saying. They're saying, yeah, these all of these different aliens out there are they're treating them as if they were gods, right? And think that they created themselves via evolution. Jimmy Akin speculated about the sacramental marriage between aliens and humans. Said if humans can have sex with aliens, then in what he was broadcasting, and this is a guy who is, I think he's a Catholic apologeticist, is what they're referring to here. Then he began defending Freemasonry. Now he's teaching psychic studies at Rhine. New Age spirituality is spiritual narcissism, pseudo-mysticism, strange exotic beings, extraterrestrials, psychic powers, and the occult. Now, that's what they're describing about this. Now, does that sound like what I've described about what the CIA has been doing in their intelligence agencies? And, of course, it was also the Russians who were doing that as well. A pseudo-mysticism, spiritual narcissism, psychic powers, the occult. It's no wonder to me that this stuff is coming from the CIA. Jimmy went on to say, well, it's not always demons. If UAPs blow up and leave fragments of metal and stuff, we need to go with the premise that they are physical objects. Again, as I said before, you just look at the resurrected Christ and, this mixture of physical and immaterial that is there. I have an excellent interview that's going to be on Friday, and it's with a scientist who was, all of his life, he was a hardcore scientist. Even as a child, he got fascinated with it. Very bright individual. He taught physics at Harvard. He was a Emmy Award-winning science editor at, I think it was ABC. And he's written some books about his experience and how he came to faith. And he came to faith because of things like quantum physics. He's looking at quantum physics and saying, boy, this is really strange, things that happen in the quantum world, and contradictory. And he had already started to investigate, because of intelligent design, he had started to investigate these different religions. And he'd looked at Hinduism and many of these other things. And I said, what brought you to Christianity? And he said, well, at the time, his soon-to-be wife had introduced him, said, why don't you try the Bible? And he said, I looked at the Old Testament. It didn't really move him any more than some of these other religious texts. But when he got to the New Testament, it was right about the time that he was trying to figure out quantum mechanics. And he said, just like with quantum mechanics, we have all these strange contradictions, and yet you can experimentally find that they're true. He said, when I listened to Jesus, he would always offer these types of contradictions that were there. He said it really did line up, and it was just, it was in God's timing that these things came together for him. But he said, when you look at this, and you look at how much is inferred, how much the scientists cannot measure, cannot see, and the contradictions that are involved in this, I mean, for people to think, well, okay, we got a fragment here or something, that doesn't necessarily contradict anything being spiritual. And so wherever there's a deep-seated belief in aliens, there follows a whole parade of darkness and other occult practices. They're absolutely right about that. I really agree with LifeSite News on that. We are being groomed for a pseudo-religion. And again, when you look at Spielberg and the CIA, be careful about that. His movie premieres this Friday. The argument for non-rational micro-life on other planets is a wedge issue. A wedge issue, says LifeSite News, is just like bringing incest and rape into the abortion debate. It's a wedge to get this and a distraction from the key issue here. But he says, strangely, these alien visitors are always humanoid, and they're always between 4 to 8 feet tall. Why aren't they the size of bacteria? Why aren't they the size of the moon? Besides, ET promoters have made aliens in their own image. That's what is happening here. You know, it's kind of like when you look at Star Trek and you have all these all these different aliens. They're all bilaterally symmetrical. They have 2 arms, 2 legs, and that type of thing, because they have to use actors. But still, it's just the way that they imagine all this. And again, they are making the aliens in their own image. So aliens provide a science-based, quote-unquote, spirituality of love and peace, which absorbs divisive, archaic world religions. Be aware of that. Be aware of how Spielberg is going to try to pull that trick on you. It's just pure Scientology. It's going to be science-based spirituality, and it's going to get rid of these horrible religions that are very divisive and archaic. Aliens, by the way, are also superior. They taught Jesus to bend the laws of physics. They taught gurus how to open their chakras. Humans can communicate with ETs via CE5 meditation. I had to look that one up. Turns out that CE5 meditation is something that was created by Stephen Greer. You're going to see his name over and over again if you look into this stuff. Stephen Greer is one of their main sources. He has created his own little group, again, an old pseudo-religion. That's where they have the CE5 meditation. I've seen Stephen Greer has been repeatedly platformed by Alex Jones, because Alex is repeatedly into all of this occultic stuff. You know, we came here from the stars and we're going to go back to the stars. We're made out of stardust and all this other kind of stuff. It's disgusting to watch it. But Stephen Greer is somebody that he's had on multiple times. And he's pushed a lot of this New Age stuff, Alex Jones has. So the Bible is outdated. ET deniers are uneducated and they don't follow the science. Yeah, how many times have we heard that over and over again? That's why this interview on Friday, I think, is very important for people. When I talked to him, and we talked a good while after the interview, as a matter of fact, I wish we hadn't stopped it when we did, but he said, this is his personal testimony. And he said, I know a lot of people out there saying, well, I don't really need to see this documentary because I believe the Bible. I always have believed the Bible, and I just believe. He said, well, you might want to be able to give a reason for the hope that is in you. You might want to do that because the Bible tells us to do that. When people say, I don't understand why you believe, that's not much of an answer to say, well, I just believe, I always have believed. He said, if you look at how he has come to this in terms of not seeing a contradiction, they always like to set up this false dichotomy. We have science over here, and we have faith over here, and all you people of faith, you've invented God just because you don't understand how things work. We understand how things work. Well, it turns out, this guy points out how science really doesn't understand how things work. Whether you're talking about cosmology or many of these other physics issues, quantum physics and things like that, they really don't understand that. They really don't. And so anyway, conspicuously absent, says LifeSite News, are Jesus' words, I am the way, the life, and the truth. No one comes to the Father except through me. All non-Christian religions either promote or allow for belief in aliens, including Islam, Hinduism, and Buddhism. Mainstream Protestant denominations, says LifeSite News, are open to aliens. Well, they're open to LGBT and all kinds of crazy heresies. Mormons and Seventh-day Adventists promote ET belief. I've not seen that, so I can't speak to that. I'm just telling you what they're saying. So don't write me and say, well, I'm a Seventh-day Adventist and I don't believe in ETs. That's good. Catholicism and pockets of evangelical Christianity represent the last line, they say, of defense against belief in aliens. ET promoters say the Catholic Church doesn't have a formal position on extraterrestrial life. However, what they fail to say is that there's no magisterial statement that says the Church has no position on non-human incarnate rational creatures. I would just say that for me, my standard is the Bible. It isn't any institution anywhere. And when I look at that, I don't see any contradictions with anything that's been observed, but I see contradictions with their theorizing about alien life evolving on other planets. And again, if God didn't create it, then did God not create us? Is the Bible a lie? No, I'm going to look at I'm going to go with the Bible. It has a lot of historical, archaeological, and many other proofs that are self-evident in it. Not to mention the prophecies that are there about the Messiah. And we're getting away from that as we focus more and more on this political entity called Israel today. It's not the same as Israel back then. And that's one of the key things. That's one of the key proofs of the Bible, were the prophecies. So did Christ die for aliens? Were they created in God's image? These are all questions that, again, if you didn't, if you just go with Steven Spielberg, he's going to create all kinds of questions about that. As a matter of fact, they even have a table. It's an excellent article from LifeSite News. I'm not Catholic, but I think they addressed this issue pretty spot on. They said, for example, here's what the ET promoters theorize, and their theories. So I think that when they're putting this out, they have their view of cosmology. But they said, well, if you look at the Christian understanding of this, God's incarnation is in solidarity with humans. And he said, go into the world and proclaim the gospel to every living creature. He didn't say go into the cosmos. I think that's a good point. Jesus redeemed aliens, say the ET promoters. Well, why would a hypothetical superior alien who taught Jesus how to walk on water, why would they surrender to him at pain of going to hell? Why would a hypothetical alien even know about him when the laws of physics, which apply to the entire material universe, make intergalactic travel impossible? Certainly not feasible at all. And that was a physics professor that I went into detail about that as well. Aliens have their own Jesus. That's what many ET promoters will tell you. And yet the Bible tells us that God gave us his only son. They may say that God saved aliens in a different way. And yet Jesus said, I am the way, right? They might even believe that aliens never fell. Well, the Bible says that all creation fell when Adam sinned, and that Christ is going to come back to redeem all of creation at some point. So they said, finishing this up, they said they contacted Catholic Answers, and they responded, there is no Catholic position on the existence of aliens as such. Whether life exists on other planets is a scientific, not a theological question, and there is that dichotomy again. That is a false dichotomy. They want to say, well, over here we have science, and science is real. But over here you've got faith. And faith is just ignorant people who don't understand how the world works and don't want to look at it. And that's exactly what this apologetics, so-called apologetics organization is pushing out there. And that's one of the reasons why when I saw Michael Gullin and his documentary, I wanted to get him on because he speaks to that. And this is the time that we need to speak to this, especially because Canada is going now to the next step of just banning the Bible. Why? Well, because They don't like what it says clearly about what a family is, what men and women are, what their relationship to God is. And so they've passed this bill called C9. It is now passed through Canada's Senate. We've talked about this before. It's going to amend the criminal code about hate crimes and things like that. And I always said this is where it was headed. Hate crimes is really about judging people's motivations. It's not about the objective determination of whether or not a crime has been committed. It's very subjective. And I knew that it was going to eventually come after religion, and we can see that's happening now in the UK. It's happening in Canada. They're actually trying to codify that in Canada. The Campaign for Life Coalition said this is a dark day for religious freedom and free speech in Canada. The passage of this deeply troubling legislation will not stop us, however, from speaking the Word of God, even when biblical truths are increasingly attacked. And, of course, we've seen this with the person who was a Finnish parliamentarian and was also a cabinet member. I think it was Finland. They came after her multiple times. They came after her. The prosecutor came after her 3 times, and the 3rd time was the charm. She had won. Basically, what she did was when her church was celebrating a pride parade, she put up some Bible quotes that said, well, we should not be proud of this. God condemns this action. And for that, this prosecutor has come after her 3 different times. She won the first 2 times in acquittal, but he won on the 3rd time. She's appealed it all the way to their Supreme Court, and they found her guilty. It remains to be seen what punishment she's going to get for that. But she said she's fine with that because it has shown people where this is all headed. And that's what's happening in Canada now. And it will happen here as well. Bill C9 basically removes out of the hate crime bill, there was an exception saying if you have a good faith expression of your personal religious views, that's going to be exempted, and we're not going to call that a hate crime. So they remove that. So what they're telling you is that they are going to call your sincere religious beliefs hate crimes. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith recently said she does not want to see authorities monitoring church services in her province in light of this bill. We'll see just how long that lasts. I don't think it's going to be able to be sustained. And we got some comments here before we take a break. IRS Machine Gun, thank you very much for the tip. He says, "Good morning, Vietnam." I remember that Robin Williams movie. Epstein Island. I'm already seeing negative reviews of Disclosure Day, so there you go. Yeah, I mean, he's coming across as if he's putting together a propaganda piece or a polemic. And, that's people don't want to be lectured by Hollywood, especially when it comes to theology, especially by some idiot who gets his information from watching documentaries or something. Stealth Patriot. E.T. turned me into an apostate. That's right. It certainly helped Reese's Pieces, though. I mean, their stock went up 65% when E.T. came out. They made that famous. Hedge 88. Spielberg movies have become unintentional comedies. That's right. Stealth Patriot. You can play the music and do without the flying bicycles. That's right. I can play John Williams' music and do without the movies. The only one, like I said, that I really care about is Jurassic Park. I thought that was pretty good. The technical director says, the Front Porch Media, the technical director and paleontologist for Jurassic Park, Jack Horner, is on the Epstein list. Oh, well, that's interesting. It is interesting. It really is. But, the other thing, too, about Jurassic Park, and again, this was a story that was by, what is the guy's name now? The author.
Michael Crichton?
Yes, thank you. Michael Crichton came up with that idea. Steven Spielberg did not come up with that idea. And Michael Crichton, I've talked about this in the past, his whole thesis that he had, and the reason that he wrote the book, Jurassic Park, was because he wanted people to look at this and say, well, just because you can doesn't mean that you should. You know, the statement that he has Jeff Goldblum character say in the movie. And he was very concerned about how rapidly people were moving towards genetic engineering and modification. And he said, the technology is moving very rapidly, but people are not talking about the consequences. So that's why Michael Crichton wrote the novel, and he was very explicit about that in the introduction. And yet, when you see the movie, you come away with the idea that the genetic modification, and they have pushed this as well with CRISPR. Oh yeah, we're going in like with a scalpel, and we're identifying this little rung of the DNA ladder, and we're going to change that one and put something else in there. It's not that precise. And now that they've got a different technique, now they tell you, well, CRISPR really wasn't all that accurate. And so when are they going to tell us the truth about this one? It's always like that. It's like a jobs report from the Department of Commerce. It's always or labor that does that.
Yeah,
they always adjust it when the next one comes out.
It's funny how the story about warning people about genetic modification has been the thing that people think of when they think of good genetic modification. Even it reminds me of the "Don't create the Torment Nexus" meme. It's finally scientists have invented the Torment Nexus from the classic sci-fi movie "Don't Create the Torment Nexus."
Yeah, exactly. They're really using Jurassic Park now to sell all this genetic modification. You got a company out there that is dedicated to, first of all, bringing back the mammoths, right? And I think it's they've actually got that in the title of the company. I don't remember the exact title, but Alien Poop Evolution.
But, all the connections in Hollywood, that does seem like the one prayer that the Chabad false messiah could grant is make me a well-connected director in Hollywood.
Yeah, he doesn't have to ask God for that. He can pull the strings himself. Alien Poop Evolution says, who created the aliens? Rocks don't produce life. That's absolutely right. It's so funny when you look at these pronouncements and say, oh, we found water in such and such a planet or something like that. Well, if they really did find water somehow, and again, the question is, how did you determine that? Can you see it? If they really did have water, as I said before, water is necessary but not sufficient for life. I'll never forget going to the British Museum with Travis and Lance, and we saw the desk and all the equipment that Charles Darwin had. And he didn't even have a microscope. He had a magnifying glass that you hold in your hand. And I said, no wonder he thought that if he left water around and it got stagnant, and after a while he starts seeing things moving around in it because he's got so many bacteria that you can actually see it at that point. And he thinks it is spontaneous generation, that the water is giving birth to life spontaneously. And I said, that kind of ignorance is still being propagated by organizations like NASA out there telling you, we found water, therefore there's life on this planet. It's like, no.
And it also makes me think of the, test the spirits to see if they be from God. Finding bacteria on Mars, for instance, isn't going to shake anyone's beliefs. But that's not what these UFO things are always about. It's always some pseudo-spiritual thing, like this comet that's coming up is talking about.
That's right. Yeah, it's usually something that is 4 to 6 feet tall, bilaterally symmetrical. Doug did 007. I watched a documentary that found the one thing that people who claimed to have alien encounters had in common was that they had all dabbled in the occult. Ouija boards, tarot cards, etc. Yeah, I agree. I've seen that as well. And I've heard that from other people as well. And again, I can't say that all of them have had that, but the vast majority of people who've been interviewed like that, they have, especially the ones who've been abducted, say that they were abused, they were all messing with, so far, the ones that they have checked on were messing with the occult. He also says, our government has been priming us to believe that aliens are real for decades, so I think you're right, many will be deceived. Yeah, they want to believe it because it's not just the government, it's also Hollywood. You go back to even The Day the Earth Stood Still. I really enjoyed that film, but I rejected its cosmology and its theology, and it was selling you a theology, no doubt about it. They tried to present this as, the guy who comes to Earth with Klaatu and so forth, and he talks about the great spirit, that is out there. So They were giving you a cosmology, a theology that, yeah, there is a God over the entire universe that's even over these aliens and over these aliens that look like human beings. But the guy had been shot and he was dying, and there was no question about, well, what happens after this alien dies? You know, has he lived a perfect life? Is he in a relationship with God? Or does he need a savior? Yeah, go into all the world, not all the cosmos, and tell people the good news about Christ. Haibu says, if there are aliens, why don't they just come out and show themselves? Why so secretive? That's right. Patty Wax, people who would never read or study the Bible will endlessly give their opinions on God. And they'll make movies as well and give us their opinions through movies. We're going to take a quick break, folks, and we'll be right back.
APS Radio delivers multiple channels of music right to your mobile device. Get the APS Radio app today and listen wherever you go.
Well, I have from time to time people will contact me wanting me to interview them because they've got a book or something that they've written. And in this particular case, I was contacted for an interview. This person's name is Joanna Newman. And there was a reference in her to her Substack, an article on her Substack. And so I had not read the book, but I thought, let me read the article here. And the article was Why Democrats Hate America. And I thought, are we going to go down this path of partisanship here and Trump cheerleading? And yes, she did. She said patriotism didn't used to be partisan, but now the radical left has decided that honoring this country is beneath them. Well, she does have a lot of examples of crazy things and things that are in opposition to America's history and its heritage that is a pushback for the 4th of July that is not about Trump. But then, of course, she does cast this as a pushback against Trump. And, you know, quite frankly, many of them are crazy. Some of them are right. We do have a president who thinks he is a monarch. And so she says a covey of B-list artists, too unimportant to name, have withdrawn from the Great American State Fair. Well, I got to ask, if they are so unimportant and you don't even want to name them, why did Trump pick them in the first place? He must have wanted them to perform. He was very offended when they canceled on him, and he had, out of the 9 acts, 7 of them canceled, and said, this has become all about Trump instead of about our country and our history and our heritage. We don't want to have anything to do with that. And so then he said, all right, fine, I'm just going to cancel the whole thing, and I'll just do a speech myself, or maybe I'll sing, because I can pull in a crowd that's bigger than Elvis. Ali Velshi, she writes, an MS Now host who calls himself a Kenyan Muslim and who became a U.S. citizen in 2015, recently said he feels a, quote, deep unease in terms of celebrating America's 250th anniversary of its democracy. Why? Because of a history of racism. His evidence, the Supreme Court is allowing redistricting. Maybe we should make the citizenship test harder. Yes, the left is crazy, folks. But I've got to say that I've got a real issue in terms of celebrating where America is right now. Not our history, but where America is right now. The same Ali Velshi, who in 2020 claimed as fires raged and buildings burned behind him in Minneapolis, that the protesters are not generally unruly. Well, now we have the right also is unhinged. They can't say that Trump is mostly peaceful. They can't say that Trump is mostly constitutional. Trump is as unhinged as this guy, Ali Velshi, and he is unattached to America's founders or the values that America's founders put in, as well as the rule of law. And I got to say that his supporters are even more so. And she goes on to say the Washington Post was apoplectic recently that Congress might allow Trump's image on a new $250 bill for the holiday. Why isn't she apoplectic about that? It got me very upset as well. CNN's Caitlin Collins upbraided Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent with a comment designed to shame the administration into abandoning patriotism. Wait a minute. Now we're defining patriotism as putting Trump's picture on the $250 bill.
Which is against the law. It's
Which is against the law,
only
yeah.
if you violate the law of the United States.
Yeah, it will eventually happen. They will either change the law, which they're already trying to do, or he will die, and then they will do it to honor him, so they can ride the bandwagon for people like this. But yeah, abandoning patriotism. Do you think it's politically that it's a good idea to put his face on a $250 bill when people are struggling to afford gas and groceries? That's what Caitlin Collins said. Again, that is a non sequitur. But it does speak to his created inflation. And he just said this week that, yeah, we were doing great, but I said, well, I've got to take a turn. I've got to go do this thing, and it's going to trash the economy, it's going to create inflation, but I'm okay with that. And Americans are just going to have to pay for it. Remember when we criticized Biden for doing that? Oh, it's going to be a lot of pain, but yeah, it's going to be better because we're going to start to wean people off of fuel and a life that is based on cheap, available energy. It's not only the quality of your life, but it is the life expectancy is dependent on cheap, abundant energy. Biden was going to take that away from us as a deliberate policy. Did Trump do that deliberately as well to crash the economy, to create a global depression and a world war? That is the issue. But he decided that he was going to ramp up inflation because we needed to do it for Israel. You could attribute all this to anti-Americanism. You could attribute it all to Trump derangement syndrome. Now we've got her pegged right here. You know, that's how pathetic this always is. They always resort back to that. That's their explanation for everything. These are the people who equate patriotism with putting a living president's picture on the currency, the current president's picture on currency. That is the opposite of everything the founders of this country were about. They would have denounced him as a monarch wannabe, but he has actually acted that way by his executive orders and his fake emergencies to enable his executive order. So yeah, let's talk about the TDS, the 4D chess. There's a lot of different Ds in this. It's not just the derangement of the left about him, how much they hate him, but it's also the delusion of his followers who love him so much. And then it is Trump's desperation as well that we have seen, caught in this trap of a war for Israel, and the depression that he is creating. There's your 4 Ds. Delusion, derangement, desperation, depression. It's all right there around Trump. She says, I think this goes deeper than Trump derangement syndrome. Their calling card is the demonization of MAGA and the cause of power. Really? She is now rallying around your tribal identity. Oh, they're not just coming after Trump. They're coming after us. How many times have we heard that as well? The New Yorker recently published a piece attacking patriotism. The piece concludes excessive national pride can debase the nation. Did the New Yorker stumble into something that is actually true? I think that is true, quite frankly. God hates pride, and he hates a haughty spirit. And pride does go before a fall. And that applies to nations as well as to individuals. That's why, when it was a non sequitur for me to talk about Pride Month. I mean, what the people are proud of is not even an achievement. They're proud of their rebellion to God. But God doesn't like pride even about something that is positive. In New York, Mayor Mamdani has banned all gatherings of more than 20 people for 4th of July. So, as the America 250 organizers have arranged a ball drop in Times Square, as July 3rd turns to July 4th, the ball can drop, but there will only be cameras on hand to witness it. And again, why would he do that? This is the litany of leftist measures that she runs through. In Long Beach, California, for the last 10 years, fireworks were always on the menu, but this year they have vetoed the idea, saying that fireworks hurt the ocean. Around here, the issue is, what we saw on New Year's Eve, is that for the first time since we've been here, nobody locally was using any fireworks. They can't afford them anymore because of inflation and because of what Trump is doing to the economy. In Boston, where Sam Adams began the rebellion, the nearby town of Nantucket, the Second Unitarian Meeting House Society has canceled its annual 4th of July reading of the Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Rights. Why? So they can better understand our own whiteness. And in Philadelphia, the museum there has a new exhibit to explain to people how slaves built the country and white settlers colonized it, all on stolen land. And again, so people can spin this and spin false narratives about it, which is what we were just talking about in terms of the UFO stuff. The left,
the whole thing about pride in a nation is, it's what the founders talked about. You have to watch the country, suspect any who approach the jewel of liberty. You can't just trust the government, be proud in the government. But at the same time, these people are trying to erase the historical history of what they did in things like, the founding of this country in order to destroy any connection to the country so that they don't have any will to continue to guard with passion the jewel of liberty.
I agree. Yeah, it is about the history and it's about principles. But, we can get into a situation where we get so obsessive with flag etiquette and stuff that it starts to me to look like some kind of occultic ritual, like a religious ritual. And that's the point at which I say, okay, I'm not having anything to do with that. The left spits on the graves of great men and women who created our nation, but Trump is radiating with pride. He's radiating in pride within himself. He is marshaling in a great big birthday party. And of course, he's starting it on his own birthday. You might have a clue about that, don't you think? So the nation's birthday is going to begin with celebrations on his birthday. So she said this is the reason that she wrote her book, which is why she sent the thing to me to promote. Her book was Trump's Superpower. And that's when I looked at it. I was like, oh, wait a minute. Where's this person coming from? When Trump decided to put his face on a $250 bill, folks, he showed that he has absolutely nothing in common with the founders of this country. He's just another self-worshiping tyrant. And they pushed back against that. As a matter of fact, when they were talking about the first images that they were going to put on coined money, and again, paper currency was not even an issue for people like George Washington and Thomas Jefferson. They had seen the damage of a fiat paper currency. Not worth a continental was an expression that was based in their recent history. They saw what happened with a debased paper currency. But when they were talking about what design shall we put on the coins that we meant, they said, let's not put anybody's face. Let's put something that represents liberty or something. We'll have some, mythical representation or something like that on it. because we don't want to honor a particular person. That looks too monarchical. And when you stop and think about why did Trump pick 250, right? Is it because of the 250 years or whatever? Or is it because that would be the most valuable currency out there in terms of paper currency? You see, we have denominations of $1, $2, $5, $10, $20, $50, and $100. At one point in time, we did have higher denomination bills. As a matter of fact, notes in circulation greater than $100 were printed in 1945, but they were officially withdrawn from circulation in 1969. There were, at one point in time, $500 bills, $1,000 bills, $5,000 bills, $10,000 bills, and there was even a $100,000 gold certificate that had, of all things, Woodrow Wilson's picture on it. That is now the 500, the 1,000, the 5,000, and the $10,000 bills are no longer printed, and they haven't been printed since 1945, but they are collector's items, and so their value is even higher than the face value of the currency. So, of course, you're not going to see those circulated. The bottom line is that Trump picked an amount, $250, because he is the most valuable of all the presidents, according to him. I mean, just take a look at what he did with that, the lineup of all the different pictures of all the presidents, and then he puts a picture of an auto pen or something for Biden. He's just trolling people. He's trolling you when he does a $250 bill as well. And he's worshiping himself. It's antithetical to everything this country was founded on. Now, that's why when I look at this, I'm not going to be celebrating the 4th of July with this stuff either, because it has turned into a celebration of Trump. Trump is America. And if you don't agree with Trump, according to these people, according to the GOP, according to MAGA, according to this author, if you don't honor Trump, you are not patriotic. That is such a dangerous anti-American idea. So she goes on, when you look at this, the $250 note has not been enacted because it is against the law, but they're working on changing the law and removing that so that a living person can be put on the currency. Why would we wait until somebody dies? Well, we might want to look at their life and review, and if we find something like a long relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, that might be something people would object to, putting his face on a dollar bill. I guess we should start calling these, they call the 250s, have you got any Epsteins, right? Instead of any Franklins, have you got an Epstein? Washington and Jefferson opposed the monarchical tradition of putting a leader's image on coins. The Mint Act of 1792 mandated that U.S. coins, and notice not paper but coins, would feature an impression that was emblematic of liberty rather than a president's portrait. Abraham Lincoln was the first president on a U.S. coin, and that only happened in 1909. And so you see the fact that the first American Republic, and we're about to hit the 4th version of it. You know, there was a first version that was there, and that was overthrown by Abraham Lincoln. And then FDR overthrew that and went further down that path. But in the interim, you had these people who had been part of the Grand Army of the Republic who were ushered in as the political leaders throughout the country. And they were the ones who were rushing through this stuff like Abraham Lincoln in 1909. They were the ones who pushed to get the Federal Reserve and the income tax. They also wanted to, they amended the Constitution to destroy the power of the states by changing senators from being appointed by the state, made them elected like the House of Representatives. It was supposed to be, the bilateral Congress was supposed to represent the two power sources of the people in the House of Representatives and the states in the Senate. But the Grand Army of the Republic hated the idea that there would be any power left in the states, so they did everything they could to get rid of that. Jefferson focused on things like equality and civic responsibility, that all men are created equal, not on his own personal glorification. And again, would just be unthinkable to any of the founders that a sitting president would create a tribute to himself like this. But of course, he's putting his picture on buildings in Washington like he's some kind of a Soviet leader. It's absolutely amazing. You want to have a military parade. Just look at everything the man does. It's just beyond belief. So the Great American State Fair is going to be on the National Mall. It's going to kick off on Trump's birthday. And again, the concert series has been canceled by the people who he wanted to participate in it. He didn't cancel it. They canceled him. And they're going to have the largest fireworks display in history. Of course, we got to have something excessive again. And then they're going to culminate all this stuff, I guess, in the White House UFC fight. Again, very much like Idiocracy. We're going to have this professional wrestling type of thing that's going to be happening there, as well as some kind of an IndyCar race that's going to be going on in Washington, D.C. Whoop-de-doo. I will not be making the trip. So what is the legacy of all these different founders? It is kind of interesting to look at why the Federal Reserve picked these different people, what their relationship was. I've always thought that, they picked Alexander Hamilton. It was not because he was a president, of course, but he was somebody who was pushing for a national bank. And so, they put him on the $10 bill to honor that. Of course, Abraham Lincoln pushed the first income tax. He pushed paper currency for the first time. And so they want to honor him for doing that. They have to put Washington in. But then they go to Andrew Jackson, who one of his key points was to kill the Second National Bank that was there. It had already been killed once, came back, and he killed it, and they almost killed him for his trouble. But there was an assassination attempt on him. Kind of interesting. The gun misfired, and Andrew Jackson was old, but he was a tough soldier. He beat the guy pretty severely with his cane. And decades and decades later, they pulled this gun out and said, I wonder why this thing did not fire. It was still loaded, just as they had picked it up. They pulled the trigger and it fired right away, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, they tried to kill Andrew Jackson, but he killed the bank at that point in time. So then I guess they put his picture on some paper currency to kind of take a victory lap. And then when you look at Grant and why he's on the $50 bill, Grant was the one pushing for a gold standard, and he wanted to have the currency backed by gold, and that created controversy because a lot of people wanted to have the bimetallic standard and silver, and so there was a lot of people who were agriculture interests who wanted to have silver, and William Jennings Bryan said, "You're not going to crucify this country on a cross of gold," to paraphrase him. And so that created a bit of a controversy around the money. So, of course, they put him there. They did not put FDR on. I think they did put him on one of these really big bills that are not in circulation. But FDR took us off the gold standard, and so did Richard Nixon in their own ways. But it's a big difference between sound money and fiat currency. Sound money is coinage. They were not creating something that was going to be backed by something. And when you stop and think about it, even if they were to back the money by gold, like Grant wanted to do, what you're looking at is basically just kind of an early form of derivatives. The same way we look at ETFs or tokenization or things like that. Why not have just the real thing in your possession? And of course, you can do that yourself. You can contact Tony Arterburn. You can go to davidknight.gold. That'll get you in touch with Tony Arterburn. You don't have to. When I think the other aspect of the Trump 250 was really kind of a hat tip as to what he's going to do to the value of our money, because he figures it's going to be something that is going to be utilized quite a bit. People are saying that it is going to be utilized by drug dealers. That's one of the reasons that they gave for taking the larger denominations from $500 up, taking them out of circulation because they're being used by organized crime and drug dealers. And people have said that about the $250 bill. But I think it won't be long before we have to use it for regular things if we start to see this kind of inflation happening. I think it'd be a fitting tribute to Trump for the inflation that he's kicked off, if we get into hyperinflation, to see that it's a common currency that is out there. So anyway, in 1816, Thomas Jefferson wrote to John Taylor. He said, "I sincerely believe that banking establishments are more dangerous than standing armies, and that the principles of spending money to be paid by posterity," that's called a debt, "under the name of funding is but swindling the future on a large scale." What would he say about $40 trillion in debt? Yes, it is swindling the future. And guess what? The future has arrived. You and I have been swindled with all this stuff. And there's no question about it. We're going to take a quick break, folks, and we'll be right back.
Making sense common again. You're listening to The David Knight Show.
If you like the Eagles,
On a dark desert highway,
the Cars, and Huey Lewis in the News,
they say the heart of rock and roll is still beating.
you'll love the Classic Hits channel at APS Radio. Download our app or listen now at apsradio.com.
Well, yesterday, Trump announced that there was a helicopter shot down in the Strait of Hormuz, and the people there were rescued by an unmanned Navy vessel. So, fortunately, they were able to get out, and they were not really injured, so they were able to climb on this drone boat, I guess you could call it. They were able to climb on it in their own strength. If they'd been seriously injured, I don't think that would have been much help to them, but he tweeted out, he said, Iranians shot down one of our highly sophisticated Apache helicopters that was patrolling over the Strait of Hormuz, and they were doing this in support of his blockade. Again, just barging in, fools rush in where wise men fear to tread. And after they closed the Strait of Hormuz, he said, you can't close it, I'll close it. And Mark Levin says, yeah, that was my idea. Great idea, Mark Levin, yeah. So we got a double closure on an area that the entire global economy is hinging on. There were two pilots involved. Both are safe and uninjured. Nevertheless, the United States must, of necessity, respond to this attack. Yeah, this is the what they call the sunk cost fallacy. You sunk my Apache helicopter, so now I've got to double down on this, quite literally. Again, they were close to the coast of Oman. And so, what does this tell us? We've got a sophisticated Apache helicopter that's shot down, and it's close to Oman, not to Iran. And maybe they should learn something about this. Again, it's not that wide. They say it's something like 21 miles across, but, for the modern weapons, that's not that much of an issue. And I don't know how far the Iranian people had to shoot in order to take this thing down, but it's somewhere in that neighborhood, 20-something miles probably. And they were able to take that down. So again, we have to restart the war, even though the crew is okay, just to save face. Just like he's got to go in and get the nuclear dust, even though he says it's effectively entombed based on what he did a year ago. There was no reason for us to go to war except that Netanyahu demanded it. And so it was already effectively entombed, but we got to go get it. And he's even said, basically, it would just be for a PR effect. And so, this week we got to escalate the war yet again for a PR effect. Nobody injured. The pilots are fine. Nevertheless, we're going to have to do something about this. And so, again, they're part of the blockade. And it was just a couple of days ago that the blockade people attacked a civilian non-combatant tanker that wasn't obeying their orders. I have a real problem with this. This is really no different from the police stopping a car. You don't obey them, they've got a right to shoot you? No, they don't. I don't think they do. The government says that they do, but I don't agree with that. Meanwhile, you got the 82nd Airborne. North Carolina now has been secretly deployed to Israel, possibly to seize Karg Island. And if you remember, they moved them quite some time ago, and then nobody was really talking about it. This is an article saying, well, they've been deployed to Israel. Where did they go? They didn't put them in any of the Gulf states. They put them in Israel as part of a contingency plan to seize Karg Island, the nerve center of Iran's petroleum industry. The deployment suggests that any attack on Karg might be a joint U.S.-Israeli operation, says the New American. Well, again, don't bet on it. Is the IDF that stupid? No, they'll let us do it, right? Because Trump is that stupid. I trust the Marines, said Lindsey Graham. Remember that? Yeah, they took Iwo Jima. He didn't say they. He said, we took Iwo Jima. We can do this. My money is always on the Marines. You guys go. I am all behind you. I'm way behind you. So it wasn't him that was involved in it. As the New American points out, Graham forgot to mention, or perhaps it wasn't even important to him to mention the fact that 7,000 Marines died on Iwo Jima. Their lives don't matter. It's just like Trump boasting, we've only had 13 people killed. Their lives don't matter, right? Baker's dozen, who cares? Well, their families care. And we ought all to care because we started this war. Our government started this war. Military Times reported back in March, these soldiers from the 82nd Airborne could be used for several purposes, including an attempt to seize Karg Island. Earlier in March, Reuters reported that there had been discussions within the Trump administration about an operation to take the island. Such a move would be highly risky since Iran can reach the island with missiles and drones. And of course, Scott Ritter, who was a Marine himself, Marine retired, he was just apoplectic about this. He said, can't believe that they would expose them to this kind of risk. Here's the 82nd Air. How are they going to get them on there? Any way that you bring these people in, you try to fly them in, you try to bring them in by boats, you try to drop them out of planes with parachutes. They'll be sitting ducks for the modern weapons. This whole idea of this Marine Expedition Unit and all these other things is something of an anachronism, and certainly this would be. Field Marshal Graham, says the New American sarcastically, who wants South Carolinians to, quote, and he has said this, send their sons and their daughters over to the Middle East for Israel. Because, again, as he says, I'm with Israel. Always will be. I'm with Israel. He's not with South Carolina, folks. Maybe the South Carolina people can finally throw out this corrupt guy. But, again, they can't because the elections are rigged. It's a selection. And many people have commented and sent information that say, I'm from South Carolina. We can't stand Lindsey Graham. We can't get rid of him. It's because of the way that they have set up the power of these political parties. You're not going to have a third party or an independent run for Senate against Lindsey Graham. So your only choice is going to be some crazy gender fluid weirdo. And that just doesn't fly. Although Lindsey Graham is probably some gender fluid weirdo in the closet. There's plenty of suspicions about that. But nevertheless, they're more open about their gender fluid weirdodness than Lindsey Graham is. Ken Klickenstein's report suggests that the Trump regime was or is seriously considering an attack on the island. A military source involved in the war planning tells me that deployment is tied to new U.S.-Israeli joint contingency plans. Yeah, there we go. Well, the thing is, 70% of America is opposed to this war. That's a big problem for Trump and for the Republican Party. The Pentagon kept the move into Israel secret for a good reason. It headed off public debate over a joint U.S.-Israeli operation inside of Iran amid a fever pitch of mainstream reporting on a potential ground invasion. So again, we're not allowed to know. This is the kind of stuff, more so than their pictures of UFOs or whatever. This is the kind of stuff that we need to know. This is the kind of stuff that they will not tell us, right? Constantly doing stuff in secret. We're not going to have a debate. We're not going to follow the Constitution. We're not going to declare war. We're going to have a secret war. I remember during the Vietnam War, it was a big deal when Nixon had a secret bombing campaign, and of course it wasn't secret for too long, of Laos. And it's like, where did you get the authority to do that? To expand the war to yet another country? People don't even blink twice when Trump does it now. So Klippenstein wonders why officials didn't reveal the 82nd deployment to Israel, given that they admitted that the U.S. had deployed F-22 fighters and air defense there. He said the breadth and the depth of U.S.-Israeli military cooperation goes far beyond arms sales and deconfliction, he said. And that's true. You know, when we look at what they're openly talking about now, merging the U.S. military with the Israeli military, I can't even fathom the depth of betrayal done by these Zionist prostitutes in our government. And they have prostituted themselves to a foreign government, taking its money and then taking its orders. And of course, their money is money that was stolen from U.S. taxpayers and given to Israel in the first place. You have people like Huckabee, people like Hegseth, openly talking about this, and Congress is going to pass that. And, you know, they just had we had over the weekend reports from the Pentagon saying that Israel, which always is aggressively spying on the United States, and they said now it has reached all new levels. And so there was a panel and a public discussion in Israel where they poo-pooed that idea. Interestingly enough, on the panel was Jonathan Pollard, the prototypical Israeli spy and traitor. They had him on a panel to tell people, no, we're not really spying on America. This is how clueless and desperate the Zionists in Israel really are. They really don't care.
They don't care because they don't have to. As clueless
right.
as they are, their believers are even more clueless.
That's right. And again, it's the prostitutes in Congress that they have bought. P.J. O'Rourke had a book years ago. It's called it A Parliament of Whores. And he would go after both the Republicans and the Democrats. And he was talking about Congress when he called it a Parliament of Whores. He should have lived to see this day. Yeah, he truly would not have believed what literal whores they are. So the two countries are deepening their intelligence sharing again as well. And we've seen this for the longest time. I mean, you had the Five Eyes alliance of 5 English-speaking countries, the U.S., Canada, Great Britain, New Zealand, and Australia. Well, they're going to make them the sixth eye. But that's not really anything unusual. If you stop and go back and look at Epstein, right, they were already had their eye on a lot of people to blackmail them. You know, that was the CIA and Mossad working together. Third, he said, naming Israel would expose how much of the U.S. assault on Iran is, in fact, a joint U.S.-Israeli attack, not a Trump-Netanyahu brotherhood, but cooperation at the military-to-military working level, where combined war plans are now a reality. So Charlie Company of the 2nd Battalion is still in Israel, from which no dispatches have emerged in 2 months. They're keeping it very quiet. Trump insists that U.S. is in the final throes of the Iran deal, and yet Israel continues to attack Lebanon, and the death toll there is soaring as they are bombarding it with a massive amount of ordnance. The Israeli military has also targeted towns and villages across southern Lebanon, including areas that were not covered by evacuation warnings. So they would go in and, this is what terrorists typically do. Like the IRA or something in Great Britain, they would usually call in and say, hey, we're going to bomb such and such a place, get out of there. But they do that as well, Israel does in some cases, but they didn't. They bombed areas that they had not given an evacuation warning to, and equally important, they are bombing the escape routes of the areas where they gave them an evacuation warning. What does that tell you? So clearly the air raids are expanding. Even after the latest Trump supposedly warnings directed at Netanyahu to not do anything that would sabotage a broader Iran peace agreement. Yeah, if you believe any of that stuff, I'm not going to play it again, but if you believe any of that stuff, this whole thing about, Bibi, you're just so bad, It's really more like the conversation between the two of them anyway, Oh, man, you are bad. You're so bad. You should be in jail. Anyway, agreement will be done in days, said Trump. Well, we'll see about that. I don't believe that. I say to that, I say nacho. I wish it were true. Asked whether or not it would be a matter of days or weeks, Trump said it would take 2 or 3 days. And there you have it, straight from the mouth of the ultimate liar, a bigger fabulist, if you will, than George Santos. And I say bigger because Trump's lies matter more. The White House is saying that he will forge a deal, which is good for the American people, whether or not Israel likes it. Well, do you believe that at all? I don't for a minute. Again, as Israel is attacking Lebanon, they are bombing areas that they did not give an evacuation to. They're bombing evacuation routes from the areas that they did give a warning to. They have bombed a Palestinian refugee camp, targeting civilians constantly. There have been a series of airstrikes north of Tyre along the same road that people use to exit. Vance has also said in his latest comments on Fox, he said the U.S. main objective in Iran is to ensure that Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapon. Well, then I guess we could have left a long time ago, because their nuclear stuff has also been encapsulated, according to Trump. Unless, was he lying to us then, JD? Or are you lying to us now? Why do we have to keep pushing and pushing on this? So Netanyahu has rejected Iran's red line not to attack Lebanon, and yet Trump is telling us that it's just 2 or 3 days we're going to have this. I'm sure that they will do exactly what Donald Trump wants, don't you think? Netanyahu's grand strategy is actually coming apart. This is an op-ed piece from Ann Kiernan. She said, war with Iran was the fulfillment of a 30-year dream for Benjamin Netanyahu. His dream, our nightmare, by the way. On February the 28th, he finally unleashed a full-scale attack on Iran. Better still, from his perspective, the war was a joint operation with the U.S. But his Iran campaign has gone badly wrong. The Iranian regime is still firmly in place and has shown that it can fire missiles at Iran. Hezbollah has shelled northern Israel and is battling Israeli troops in Lebanon. And now Netanyahu's close alliance with Trump is under intense strain. Well, I don't believe that. Iran's missile attacks last night were a response to Israeli strikes on southern Beirut. So now Israel has responded to that by bombing Iran. This is why there will never be peace in the Middle East. It's always the Hatfields and the McCoys. They always are responding to the previous attack, and it just keeps going on and on. Trump said, I call the shots. Yeah, right, we'll see. He said, Netanyahu doesn't call the shots. He thinks he protests too loudly, and he does nothing about it. Netanyahu now faces a very difficult choice. Does he call off the strikes against Iran and Hezbollah? If he does, he risks looking weak in the eyes of both the Iranian regime and the Israeli public. Or does he defy Trump and endanger his domination of America? Now, this author says his alliance with America. No, it is domination of America. The dilemma is all the more acute because the peace deal that Trump is working on seems likely to leave Iran in a stronger financial position. And so the closure of the Strait of Hormuz has given the Islamic Republic a new powerful tool. Tehran has shown that it can hit U.S. military bases and the infrastructure of the Gulf states, and it has further strengthened Iran's deterrent capability. Netanyahu insists that his country must have a free hand to go after Hezbollah. And let's just remember, where did Hezbollah come from? Hezbollah was organized as a resistance to an Israeli invasion of Lebanon. That's why you have Muslims and Christians supporting Hezbollah against the Israeli aggressors who come in preemptively with this. So who are the terrorists? When you terrorize a country, when you are the aggressor, you are also the terrorist. You've decided that you're going to use force or even the threat of force to achieve your social or political goals. The brutality of the Israeli campaign in Gaza has done immense damage to Israel's international standing. The International Court of Justice is agreeing to consider accusations that Israel has committed genocide. Here is a clip of a guy who is actually an older guy who was actually caught up in the Holocaust with Germany. And he says that and he's Jewish, he says what the Israeli government is doing in Gaza is a Holocaust.
What's happening in Gaza is a Holocaust. And what is currently being designed by the Israeli government is the final solution to their Palestinian problem. And as a Holocaust survivor, my reaction is not in my name. Extermination, dehumanization, starvation, blockade, lack of water and medication, the destruction of the health service, the hunting down of doctors, the hunting down of journalists, safe places which turn out to be not safe at all, but traps, concentration camps, all this together makes a clear Holocaust. Clearly, all these elements are not in any way different from similar actions by the Nazis during the Second World War. Gaza is an open-air concentration camp. In a sense, it's an extermination camp because there is no way out other than dying through bombing or disease or lack of food. Only alternative is to agree to be replaced somewhere where you don't want to be. I had not only the experience of the Holocaust and the hiding and the discrimination, etc., but the fighting went through our particular area where we were hiding. When we came out, when it was all over, I saw total devastation. Just like when you see the pictures of Gaza, destroyed buildings, piles of rubble, dead horses, dead people. I see exactly the same in Gaza. However, the great difference is that what I witnessed was a byproduct of two armies fighting. And what I see in Gaza is a deliberate destruction. And I think it's a degree evil, greater evil than what I've seen.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It is not the product of two armies fighting that's destroying the city. It is one army unilaterally attacking civilians. There is no case that can be made for that is ethical or legal case. There's no way that you can excuse that. As a matter of fact, when you look at Hamas even, it was Netanyahu and his people who pushed to get Hamas in as the government in Gaza because they wanted to have an excuse to go after the so-called terror machine. Said he has crippled Hezbollah. He has crushed most of Hamas's terror machine, he said, and devastated Iran's nuclear and missile programs. I don't think so. I don't think any of that is really true. These claims look increasingly flimsy. Hamas is still in place in Gaza. Hezbollah is still a powerful force in Lebanon, hence, their presence there, why they're still fighting there. And Iran still has, the Islamic Republic, rather, still has Iran in its grip, and they're still able to launch missiles at Israel. In each case, Netanyahu made the same mistake. He chose to pursue, and here's the key, Netanyahu chose to pursue an entirely military solution to Israel's security problems, ignoring political and diplomatic dimensions. And Trump and the Pentagon and Hegseth and all the rest of them are doing exactly the same thing. They are pursuing strictly military options. They will not do anything that is diplomatic or political. And this is something that's going to backfire. He has missold the tactical success of Israeli military and intelligence. The same thing that Hegseth and Trump are doing in terms of talking about how many bombs they have dropped and what the body counts are on the two sides. Israel cannot kill its way to security, and neither can the United States. Both Trump and Netanyahu have made their own countries less safe, less prosperous, while they enrich themselves personally. Both Netanyahu and Trump are corrupt criminals with their hands in the treasury. They've been caught time and again. The only reason they're not in jail is because of their political power, which is more evidence of corruption. I've said many times, liberty is the one thing that you can't have unless you're willing to give it to other people. Well, the same thing can be true of your right to exist as a nation. That is something that if you're going to just disregard any political or diplomatic dimensions, and you're going to say that you are the only one that has a right to exist, you're going to find that you don't exist, because people are not going to put up with that. And the entire global community is catching on to that game. Just in the same way that if you decide that other people don't have the right to speak because you don't like what they're saying, and so you're going to attack free speech, well, guess what? That comes around eventually to attacking your free speech. And again, we see the same tactic from Israel. They don't like what people are saying about what they are doing in terms of pursuing strictly a military solution, quote unquote, to this stuff. A final solution, a genocide, a Holocaust, said the Jewish guy who went through that. They don't like that. And so if you say something to criticize that, they want to shut down your free speech. They don't think that we should have liberty. And they don't think other countries have a right to exist. Israel can't deny the right to exist of everyone except itself. And that includes them taking over the United States, which they're doing as well. Trump and MAGA cannot deny free speech, as the Zionists are continually demanding that they do, and not fall into tyranny eventually here at home, where we lose not only our free speech, but all of our rights. And so there was an interesting article on Mises.org talking about the hazards of criticizing Abraham Lincoln's war. And every time you have a government that goes to war, the people who try to engage in a debate as to whether or not there should be a war are typically attacked by the people who start wars, by the tyrants who don't support the rule of law. Lincoln was such a man, and so is Trump, cut from the same cloth. One of the main concerns and debates surrounding war is that the supporters of war are often quick to accuse their political opponents of being unpatriotic, even traitors. They then silence their opponents under the guise of maintaining national unity. And as I read to you that article earlier, that woman was saying, oh, look, the people who criticize Donald Trump, putting his picture on currency, people who criticize that are unpatriotic. Because Trump is the country, right? Warmongers invariably cloak their acts of aggression in the language of righteousness. And, in this particular case, that is evidently true. When we look at dispensational theology, okay, the righteousness of supporting Israel, no matter what Israel does. This is why I've harped on the fact that Modern day Israel has no connection at all to the kingdom that King David ruled over. It has nothing to do with that. That was a theocracy. This is a secular government that denies God, even though they'll use the language of Amalek to anathematize and to target people for extermination. That's about the only connection they have. They take they're very selective as to what they take out of the Old Testament. And so there is a righteousness that is there. Again, we are told by the Zionists, both Christian Zionists and Jewish Zionists, that this is a religious crusade for a master race. And if we oppose that, we are opposing God, because Israel is God, right? Opposing war is seen as thwarting efforts to promote global peace as well. Except now, in this particular war, it is you are opposing God himself. If you don't buy into this theology and this political tactic of Zionism. They'll tell you that war is peace. They'll tell you that murder for theft is actually obedience to God. How Orwellian is that? And so looking back at the history of Lincoln, a 1994 lecture that Mises refers to, The Culture of War, they said, before long we were calling war peacekeeping. What used to be designated aerial bombing has now been euphemized into airstrikes, even surgical strikes, dishonestly implying a degree of accuracy which would make combat veterans laugh out loud. Citizens who criticize wars risk incurring the wrath of their own governments. For example, a book by John Chodes, The Northern Opposition to Mr. Lincoln's War, recounts the hardships experienced by Indianans, people from Indiana, who criticized Lincoln's war. The governor there, Oliver P. Morton, ordered that his critics be arrested, subjected civilians to military trials, imprisoned them in detention camps. He shut down newspapers, he imprisoned their editors. All this was done to rout out the traitors who did not agree that Lincoln's war was necessary to hold the Union together. Although Delaware and Virginia were, in principle, sympathetic to the Union, many citizens of these states were critical of the Republican view of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. Many in Delaware, for example, saw the Union as the union of the founders, as opposed to a sectional government that was dominated by Northern interests. To them, that did not constitute union. In Maryland, the South's First Casualty, that was the name of the book by Bart Rhett Talbert, he reports that citizens of Maryland were angered by the sight of 35 rail cars rolling through Maryland in April of 1861 as the war was kicking off, containing troops of the 6th Massachusetts Regiment. Marylanders came out to protest, cheering for Jefferson Davis and hurling paving stones at the rail cars. In the ensuing violence, there were 4 soldiers and 12 citizens who were killed, several others severely injured. The challenge in maintaining peace in Maryland was further illustrated by the fact that the National Guard was known to sympathize with the South. The governor there, Thomas Hicks, attempted to appease both sides. He said, "I'm a Marylander. I love my state, I love the Union, but I suffer my right arm to be torn from my body before I will raise it to strike a sister state." At the same time, he publicly was urging Lincoln, quote, not to promote bloodshed by forcing a way through Maryland. He expressed hopes that Maryland could remain neutral in the war. In response, Lincoln created the Military Department of Annapolis, commanded by General Benjamin Butler. This guy was a piece of work. He later was put in charge of New Orleans. They gave him the name Butler the Beast because he put out an order saying that any woman who disrespected the Union soldiers would be considered to be a prostitute and could be treated accordingly. In other words, putting out an order to rape any woman if they disrespected these people. And he famously was confiscating and stealing assets. He stole $800,000 from the Dutch consulate in silver. And so the people there gave him a second nickname. They called him Spoons Butler because he stole so much silver from people. And think about how much $800,000 was in 1860. I mean, I don't even think they've got an inflation calculator for that online. But that's the kind of guy that he was. And so Lincoln put him in charge there in Baltimore. And what he did was he suspended the writ of habeas corpus, of course. By the end of April, Maryland was under federal control. Hicks threw his hat in with the federal authorities, disarmed the state militia with orders to send all of their arms to the federal garrison. The Maryland legislature adjourned on May 14th. That night, Ross Winans, the delegate from Baltimore, was arrested without warrant by federal troops under General Butler's command. He was accused of treason because he harbored Southern sympathies. He was locked up in Fort McHenry. John Merriman of Baltimore also suffered the same fate. He was accused of voicing secessionist views. And so Winans later recanted and signed an oath of loyalty. However, there was a showdown with Merriman, and he appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court. When the federal authorities refused to obey habeas corpus writ that was written by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Taney, for his release, Taney himself feared that he might not be safe from imprisonment. This is the kind of tyranny we saw from Lincoln, and of course this article doesn't go into it, but there were also other officials in other states that where habeas corpus was suspended and people were arrested and imprisoned simply for criticizing Abraham Lincoln. Some officials fled to Canada. I mean, Lincoln was an amazing tyrant. As a matter of fact, to keep Maryland from seceding, they arrested 1/3 of the legislature, along with the editors of several newspapers. Before the legislature could meet, the Army authorities moved. They arrested members and employees of the legislature across the state between the 13th and 17th of September. Squads of troops seized about 30 of them in Baltimore and Frederick alone, while imprisoning Mayor Brown, Frank Key Howard, the editor of the Baltimore Exchange, Thomas W. Hall, the editor of the South, Elihu Riley, editor of the Annapolis Republican, and Henry May, a Maryland representative in the U.S. Congress. It's important to note that the dispute in this case was primarily constitutional. This is not about trying to preserve slavery, as I pointed out before. This is a fourth turning. It was about a move from agrarian societies and distributed power to the concentrated power of a nation state to support industrial power. We saw the same thing happening in European countries, especially Italy, which from 1865, the exact same dates, had a civil war, and it was about that fourth turning and the change from an agrarian-focused political institutions to institutions around manufacturing. So this is primarily constitutional. Conservatives argued the violation of the Constitution was unlawful, that unconstitutional conduct by the federal government was not justified to deal with the fake emergency created by the secession of southern states. Radicals saw the Constitution as an unsatisfactory compromise at best and deemed it necessary to reinterpret its meaning. This is what Trump does all of the time. This is what the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, does. He says, we can't be bothered with search warrants. Can you imagine? It would take us forever to get search warrants to go after all the people we want to arrest. The radical view that despotism is justified for a good cause was actually considered by John Stuart Mill to be compatible with liberalism. In his essay, Consideration on Representative Government, he said, despotism may be justified so long as it is for a time that is strictly limited and for a temporary purpose. In other words, the end justifies the means. Today we have the people like Curtis Yarvin, the philosopher and enabler for Trump and the technocrats. Curtis Yarvin has talked about his dark enlightenment. You know, he's supposedly a libertarian. He talks about libertarian ideas, but he says, We're not ever going to get there through democracy. We have to have a tyrant to impose liberty. Think about that. He says that without any sense of absurdity. And that is really where we are right now. These people want to set up a techno-feudalism. And when you look at what he talks about, he cynically criticizes the Christian foundation of our country. He thinks that's weak. As a matter of fact, he calls those institutions the cathedral. He is as critical of the Christian foundations of respecting the right of humans created in the image of God. He is as contemptible of that as Pete Buttigieg and his Marxist mentors are of the Puritans. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you for joining us. Have a good day. The common man. They created Common Core to dumb down our children. They created Common Pass to track and control us. Their Commons Project to make sure the commoners own nothing. And the communist future. They see the common man as simple, unsophisticated, ordinary. But each of us has worth and dignity created in the image of God. That is what we have in common. That is what they want to take away. Their most powerful weapons are isolation, deception, intimidation. They desire to know everything about us while they hide everything from us. It's time to turn that around and expose what they want to hide. Please share the information and links you'll find at thedavidknightshow.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. If you can't support us financially, please keep us in your prayers. thedavidknightshow.com.
Using free speech to free minds. It's the David Knight Show. Decoding the mainstream propaganda. It's the David Knight Show. You're listening to The David Knight Show. You're listening to The David Knight Show.